Conference will now be recorded.
The council meeting of September 15th, 2020 will now please come to order. Due to this meeting being a virtual meeting, council is asking if anyone would like to address council who's participating through the computer, please use the chat feature now to let Clerk Massarolo know you have a comment, and you will be called on during the comment portion of the meeting. If you are calling on a phone or do not have access to the chat feature, we will give directions during the public comment portion of our meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Broussard.
Present.
Mr. Glassburn.
Here.
Ms. Heeman. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Limpert.
Present.
Mr. Schuman. Ms. Williamson. Here.
Is there a motion on the floor to adjourn into executive session to consider the purchase of property for public purposes?
So move, Madam President.
Motion to adjourn into executive session to consider the purchase of property for public purposes made by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilwoman Heeman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard.
Yes.
Ms. Heeman. Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn.
I will abstain and not participate. Thanks.
Mr. Limpert.
Yes.
Ms. Williamson.
That motion passes with a vote of 5-0. Council will now move into executive session at 8:03 p.m. I ask council to please mute their microphones and turn off their cameras on this meeting and follow the instructions sent to join the executive session. I will wait 3 minutes from now to give everyone a chance to get dialed in. If you have any issues logging in, please reach out to our clerk so he can notify me. Once the executive session has ended, council will return and continue the rest of this meeting.
This conference will now be recorded.
I'm just waiting a moment to make sure that all of my council members have returned. The executive session has adjourned and the regular council meeting is resuming at 8:20 p.m. If there are no additions or corrections, the council meeting minutes of September 1st, 2020 are approved as written. The following legislation is considered for suspension of the rules this evening. Resolution 2020-93. Mayor Kennedy, do you have a report this evening?
Madam President, no report this evening.
Thank you. Law Director Garreau, do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Madam President. No report, but just to note that I'm not sure, did you receive the actual issue assignment, the issue numbers assigned to the charter amendments that are on the ballot? Were those distributed? Okay, good. So if anybody wants to share that information with the community, if you didn't get it, let me know, but otherwise it should have been distributed. So we're in good shape if you want to let people know what's going on or reference the issue numbers. Otherwise, no further comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Finance Director Kupfer, do you have a report this evening?
I can't hear you.
Finance Director Kupfer, do you have a report this evening?
I can't hear you.
We can hear you.
I'll speak for the finance director. I don't believe she has a report.
Okay, thank you. Moving into council committee reports. The Committee of the Whole met on September 9th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Present were council members Williamson, Limpert, Heeman, Glassburn, and Kelly, the Director of Finance, Director of Human Resources, our Clerk of Council, presenter Travis Parker, and our guests. The purpose of this meeting was to receive a demonstration on software to help improve the efficiency of publishing our agenda, but more importantly, to help increase community engagement with our city council. The software demonstrated was People Speak, and Travis Parker from Lakewood, Colorado presented the demonstration to council, and that meeting ended at 7:55 p.m. Councilman Broussard, Chairman of the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening, Madam President. Thank you.
Councilman, is there are you making the motion to amend when I ask you for the finance report?
I'm not sure. So from a procedural standpoint, maybe we can get some help from Chuck.
Are you talking about amending Resolution 2020-95? Because we don't need to amend that.
Yes.
It was just swapping out.
Thank you. So there was no amendment needed on the floor. Got it. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you. That came from me. Chuck and I did discuss that. It's not Chuck winging it here. Chuck and I did discuss that previously, and that those issues were part of the agreement. I'm not sure why they weren't in the agreement, but council's been advised, the public's been advised. We're all aware of it. When that contract's executed, that'll be reflective of the actual contents of the agreement. So I just wanted to clarify to let you know where that came from. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, Councilman Broussard. Councilwoman Williamson, Chairwoman of the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do this evening. Thank you, Madam President. The Building, Zoning, and Development Committee met on September 8th at 7:20 p.m. Present were committee members Williamson, Limpert, and Schuman, council members Broussard, Glassburn, Heeman, and Kelly, council president, the mayor, law director, human resources director, planning director, and guests. On the agenda, the first two pieces of legislation discussed were ordinances 2020-78 and 2020-79, which are amendments to chapters 1115 and 1163, respectively. This meeting followed the public hearing earlier in the evening. After a lengthy discussion in committee, a motion was made to hold these two ordinances in committee until September 22nd for further discussion, and that motion passed with a vote of 3-0. The next item on the agenda was ordinance 2020-98, which reads, an ordinance amending section 1345.05 of chapter 1345 of the building code entitled Standards for Private Residential Pools to incorporate standards established by the International Code Council for pools, spas, and hot tubs installed at residential properties. Director Gallo explained that this is a housekeeping ordinance. The International Code Council for pools, spas, and hot tubs retitled the section which addresses these standards for private pools. As our codified ordinances adopted these standards by reference, our ordinance requires this amendment. Motion was made to recommend approval to all of council, and that motion passed with a vote of 3-0. The next item on the agenda was ordinance number 2020-99, which reads, where is 2020-99? I apologize. It's an ordinance amending and reestablishing section 1359.09 of chapter 1359 of the building code entitled Maintenance of Unoccupied Commercial Buildings in order to establish the appeal process from an order of the building commissioner. This ordinance is another housekeeping ordinance that clarifies the appeals process in chapter 1359 by changing the title from director to the building commissioner. Motion was made to recommend approval to all of council, and that motion passed with a vote of 3-0, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Broussard, as Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do have a report this evening, Madam President. Thank you. The Streets and Transportation Committee met on September 8th at 6:45 p.m. Present were committee members Glassburn, Kelly, and Limpert. Council members Broussard, Schuman, Heeman, and Jones. The mayor, planning director, city engineer. On the agenda was resolution 2020-100, which was an ordinance amending the traffic control file of the city of North Homestead to remove the no parking signs on Charles Road. Councilman Schuman noted that these signs were likely put up decades ago when traffic at the church was more prevalent, the nearby church. Both residents and adjacent buildings do not have an issue with removing the signs, and a motion to remove the signs passed by a vote of 3-0. The meeting ended at approximately 7:03 p.m. Madam President, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman, Chairwoman of the Environmental Control Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do, Madam President. Thank you. The Environmental Control Committee met on September 9th to discuss 2020-93, a resolution authorizing the city engineer to solicit statements of qualifications, SOQs, from qualified professional engineers to provide engineering services for the South Intercept Equalization Tank project, and further authorizing the mayor, following approval by the Board of Control, to enter into a contract with the firm selected in the request for qualifications RFQ process and declaring an emergency. The meeting was called to order at 7:55 p.m. Present were committee members Heeman, Glassburn, and Williamson, Council President Jones, Council members Kelly and Limpert, and Finance Director Kopfer. Let the record note that Mr. Glassburn did not participate in the meeting itself. We briefly discussed bringing 2020-93 back onto the agenda at its second reading place for this evening, but that we would approve it with suspension pending the executive session of council to understand and have more information with regard to the land with pertaining to this project. Chairwoman Heeman made a motion to approve the legislation for suspension. Councilwoman Williamson approved that, and it passed 2-0. And that then will be on suspension this evening. That's the end of my committee report, but Madam President, may I have a moment of privilege, please?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to pass my condolences on to Emily and Margaret Sweeney. They are the family of Patrick Sweeney, one of our, gosh, just most admired, I think, Ohio public servants who passed away just a few short days ago. And I really have had the pleasure of knowing the family well, and actually followed Mr. Sweeney's advice carefully when it comes to how to interact with constituents. And I think that his service, we could all learn from the service that he provided to the state of Ohio. I would also, Madam President, like to remind everyone that our mask giveaway starts tomorrow, Wednesday, the 16th. It will be at Maple Intermediate School from 4 to 7. Thursday, the 17th, it will be at Chestnut Intermediate from 4 to 7. Friday, it will be at North Homestead Middle School, 4 to 7. And Saturday, the 19th, at the Joanne Fabric Store at the Great Northern Plaza, 10 to 2. I'd like to say that I think that they're all pretty excited. It turns out that the manager of the Joanne Fabric Store is a North Homestead resident and is very excited to have her store participating in this program. And so if any of you would like to jump in and help, well, we'd love that. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilman Glassburn, Chairman of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly, Chairman of the Recreation, Public Parks and Buildings Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that our Finance Director Kopfer has rejoined us, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to give a report as well.
Thank you, Madam President. Sorry about the technical glitch. First, we received notice that the City of North Olmsted received the Auditor's Award with distinction for our 2019 audit. That is a great honor for us, and we've had it for multiple years in a row, so we're proud of that. The COVID update, the first round of funding was $763,245.52. The second round, which we just received today in our account, was $381,622.76. The transfer ordinance that's in that is before you and will be going to committee, we put the dollars in there so that we could get them to start being spent, but I'm not sure about the categories because so we might have to amend that in the committee after we talk on Tuesday. The other thing is that the Ohio Senate has passed Senate Bill 357, and it is currently in front of the Ohio House, which is technically round 3 of CARES Act funding. All the same rules apply, except that you don't have to have it encumbered until November, and you don't have to report until February 1st and return the additional dollars. However, that extra month is only for housekeeping. It is not for spending. So you still have to have it spent by the end of December to qualify for CARES Act funding. And that amount is estimated to be $1.1 million for the City of North Olmsted. It is a large sum. But it's based on population this time. The other two were just our local government allocation. That was what was utilized to distribute the funds. And this one was distributed on population. So that's the difference in it. I've been spending a lot of time talking to people about ideas, and I've been looking at ways, because there's been some clarifications which still aren't very clear if you're talking from the federal government. However, we feel that there are some wages that we can apply toward that funding, which would then be a benefit to our alleviate some of the shortage of funds, because the dollars that we spend on wages would then be reimbursed by the federal government, and then that money would leave us in a not as bad position as we're probably going to be if we don't do that. So these are the things that we've been talking about, and I've been working at coming up with clarification and quantifying it, because you have to present, have logic behind your arguments for the dollars that apply as of wages. So that's what I've been working on, and hopefully we'll have that information for you on Tuesday, and I'll have more details and updated spreadsheet and all that for you. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Kopfer. And speaking of money based on population, that reminds me of the need for all of our communities to make sure that their members, all of our residents, are filling out the 2020 census. Are there any letters or communications to come before council at this time?
No, Madam President.
Thank you.
Council President Jones, you muted yourself.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. My papers fell on top of my screen. Thank you all for joining our council meeting this evening. At this time, council will hear comments from the public. Please remember to state your name and address for our clerk. If you live in a city other than North Homestead, please state the name of that city. We will start with those who have notified us via chat. Anyone who has not notified us via the chat feature who would like to comment, please unmute your phone and start your comment when prompted. Clerk Mazzarolo, has anyone notified you that they would like to comment?
No, Madam President.
Thank you. At this time, if there's anyone on the phone who would like to comment, please address council now. Seeing no comments from our audience, we will now move into legislation.
Legislation on third reading.
Council President, I think Mr. Sturgeon had his hand up to be heard.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sturgeon. Please go ahead with your comment to council.
Thank you very much. Jeff Sturgeon, 3092 West 231. Just 3 quick questions. I wonder if anybody can tell me how the Clegg Road project is shaping up, and is there any news or future meetings regarding this? Second question is city council meetings. Is there any news of when we may be able to start meeting live in person up at City Hall? Any news or anything about regarding that? And also wondering, is this a governor order now that we're still not allowed to meet up there? And the third question is Halloween trick-or-treating officially canceled for the city of North Homestead for 2020?
Mayor Kennedy.
Okay, so I'll handle them, Jeff. Okay, so your first question, Halloween is not officially canceled, no. We're looking at that. We'll see what other cities are doing. The reason we're not having public meetings in person is because there's a 10-person limit. As soon as the governor lifts that, then we go back to potentially normal. And then Kim, I'll let you handle Clegg Road.
Thank you, Madam President. To the resident's question, our consultant has prepared some draft information on the study that's been circulated to representatives from the county, ODOT, and the city. We're providing comment back, and I anticipate having a presentation for council and a piece of legislation to apply for safety funding to come to council at your first meeting in October. So we've made good progress on the study, and we're shortly ready to present to council some findings for council's feedback and consideration.
Will there be any public meetings regarding Clegg Road, did you say?
The meeting would be City Council's committee meeting and discussion of the study and discussion of any legislation that would be a funding application.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgeon. We will now move into legislation.
Legislation on third reading. Resolution 2020-95, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution approving of and authorizing the mayor to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1267, AFL-CIO, for the city's firefighters for the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023.
Madam President,
Councilman Broussard.
I move to adopt Resolution 2020-95 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt Resolution 2020-95 made by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilman Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Resolution 2020-95 is adopted with a vote of 6-0.
Resolution 2020-96, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county fiscal officer.
Madam President,
Councilman Broussard.
I move to adopt Resolution 2020-96 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt Resolution 2020-96 made by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilman Kelly. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Resolution 2020-96 is adopted with a vote of 6-0.
Legislation on second reading. Resolution 2020-93, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the city engineer to solicit statements of qualifications, SOQ, from qualified professional engineers to provide engineering services for the South Intercept Equalization Tank project, and further authorizing the mayor, following approval by the Board of Control, to enter into a contract with the firm selected in the request for qualifications, RFQ process, and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Councilwoman Heeman.
I'd like to request suspension of the rules requiring 3 readings, as this has been heard twice in committee and then discussed earlier this evening, and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings made by Councilwoman Heeman, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes, with a comment. I'd like to also state that this is actually important for the health and safety of all of our residents, and I thank council for helping with the suspension and also their patience in collecting the information. Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Will abstain.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
That motion passes with a vote of 5 and 1 abstention. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council regarding Resolution 2020-93?
Madam President,
Councilwoman Heeman.
seeing/hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to adopt 2020-93 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt Resolution 2020-93 made by Councilwoman Heeman, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn? Mr. Glassburn? Mr. Glassburn,
Abstain.
are you abstaining?
Yes.
Resolution 2020-93 is adopted with a vote of 5-0 and 1 abstention.
Ordinance 2020-98, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance amending section 1345.05 of chapter 1345 of the Building Code entitled Standards for Private Residential Pools to incorporate standards established by the International Code, Council for Pools, Spas, and Hot Tubs installed at residential properties. Ordinance 2020-99, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance amending and reestablishing section 1359.09 of chapter 1359 of the Building Code entitled Maintenance of Unoccupied Commercial Buildings in order to establish the appeal process from an order of the Building Commissioner. Ordinance 2020-100, introduced by Councilman Schuman. An ordinance amending the traffic control file of the City of North Olmsted to remove the no parking signs on Charles Road. Legislation on first reading. Ordinance 2020-101. An ordinance to make and transfer appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the City of North Olmsted for the year ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Resolution 2020-102. A resolution directing the fiscal officer of Cuyahoga County to pay to the City of North Olmsted, Ohio, during the year 2021, all money due and owing said city from any collection source.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce and place on first reading.
Ordinance 2020-103. An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $1,415,000 of notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to provide funds to pay part of the city's portion of the cost of improving Brook Park Road between certain termini in cooperation with the Department of Transportation of the State of Ohio by grading, draining, curbing, reconstructing and rehabilitating the pavement base, and adjusting, constructing, and reconstructing catch basins, curbs and curb ramps, manholes, and utility valve and monument boxes where necessary, preparing the surface and resurfacing, and providing decorative lighting and landscaping, in each case together with necessary appurtenances and work incidental thereto.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Madam President,
Councilman Broussard.
I am in receipt of the fiscal officer certificate.
Thank you.
Resolution 2020-104. A resolution authorizing the mayor or director of public service to advertise for bids for the award of a contract to purchase concrete materials and related supplies for the year 2021, as detailed in the specifications on file with the engineer, and authorizing the mayor, following approval of the Board of Control, to contract for the same with the lowest and best bidder.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Resolution 2020-105. A resolution authorizing the mayor to purchase computer products, including desktops, from CDW Government LLC at a cost of $47,886.55 through the state purchase program, and further authorizing the mayor to execute all documents necessary to effectuate such purchase and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Ordinance 2020-106. An ordinance amending and reestablishing Chapter 167.99 of the Administrative Code entitled Composition and Organization of the Department of Human Resources in order to implement organization changes within the department and to create the new position of Building Department Coordinator and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Ordinance 2020-107. An ordinance to establish the positions of Division of Building Coordinator, full-time and part-time, and corresponding compensation for each, and otherwise restate the compensation rates and descriptions for various administrative and legislative personnel for the years 2018, 2019, and 2020, and declaring an emergency.
Madam President,
Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Thank you. And looking forward to scheduling our committee meetings for next Tuesday, September 22nd. Councilwoman Williamson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to schedule a BCD committee meeting to discuss 2020 78, 79, and 106. And that meeting would go from 7 to 7:20 p.m. And I'd ask that the mayor or his designee be present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Broussard.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll schedule a Finance Committee meeting at 7:20, should run until about 7:40. We're going to discuss 2020 101, 102, 103, and 107. Regarding 101, 102, and 103, I would ask that the Finance Director be present. And then for 107, I'll ask that the HR Director be present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert.
Yeah, I'd like to have a Streets and Transportation Committee meeting at 7:40 on that same night to address Resolution 2020-104. I would ask that the mayor or his designee be present.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to schedule a Recreation, Public Parks and Buildings Committee for 7:45 p.m. to discuss 2020-105 and ask that the mayor be there, please.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the floor to excuse the absence of Councilman Schuman?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to excuse the absence of Councilman Schuman from tonight's meeting made by Councilman Limpert, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Broussard,
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Councilman Schuman has been excused from tonight's meeting with a vote of 6-0. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before council, this meeting of September 15th, 2020 is adjourned at 8:53 p.m.